Hey, Los Angeles. How you doing? Good to see everybody. And now that we live stream in LA, hello to everybody who's going to be watching this after tonight. It's so bizarre, isn't it? So whether you're here in person or watching on live stream, hello. And it's an honor to have you here, and we have a great blessing here tonight. I know many of you know the extraordinary Jimmy Demers, and he is going to open for us tonight. So please join with me and give him the warm welcome that he deserves.
Thank you. Thank you. Testing. Okay. As I was driving here today, I have about a 2-hour drive, so I had a lot of time to think. And as I was driving here, it dawned on me that this is the first year since I turned 17 that I haven't gone into a recording studio. And as a singer, it's caused me to question, who am I and what am I doing with my life right now? And so I came here tonight hoping that if there's anyone in this room who might be wondering what you're doing with your life, there's something really wonderful about coming together in groups like this, whether it's to hear Marianne or just coming and seeing friends. And so I just want to thank you for showing up tonight, because in some way, my just seeing you is reminding me that I'm still a singer. So thank you. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. But now I am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my soul to fear, and grace my soul believed. I once was lost, but now I am found. And grace, it'll set you free. Grace will set you free. And grace will set you free. Grace will set you free. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I love you. Thank you. Love you so much. Have a great night.
If you had any question about whether or not you're a singer, all questions have been set to rest. Marvelous. Please introduce yourselves to the people around you, to your right, to your left, in front of you, and behind you. Those lights. Ready? All right. Let's all take a deep breath and close our eyes. We see in the middle of our mind a little ball of golden light, and we watch this light as it begins to grow, larger and larger, until now it covers the entire inner vision of our mind. We see for ourselves within this light a beautiful temple. We see a garden that surrounds the temple and a body of water that flows through the garden. We see that the inside of the temple is lit as well by this same beautiful golden light. And here we are, for we have been drawn together by the power and in the presence of God. We devote our time spent together, all of our relationships and experiences of each other, to Him. And we pray that God's most Holy Spirit be upon us, that we be lifted above, beyond the turmoil and limitations and despair of this world, to the endless love and inner peace that lay beyond. And so it is, together, we all say, Amen. So, in another couple of weeks, there will be Christmas. And Hanukkah is already upon us. And both Hanukkah and Christmas speak of miracles. Whether it has to do with the oil that the Jews thought they only had enough of for one day, that then they had enough for 8 days, or whether it has to do with the miracle of the birth of Christ. In A Course in Miracles, the idea of the Christ is the idea of the truth of who we actually are. And this is a particularly significant realization, that which we actually are, because, according to the Course, in this world we are taught that we are who we are not. And enlightenment is the surrender of a thought system that teaches us that we are who we are not, and that we are not who we actually are, and the acceptance instead of a thought system in which we accept who we actually are. Because who God created us to be is who we are. One word for that is the Christ. Now, all the great religious systems have their version, their words, that speak to this unalterable reality. It's really no different than the Buddha mind, the Shekinah in Judaism, the idea that there is a light that is beyond the light of this world. It is beyond the light that the physical eyes can register. The light in A Course in Miracles is defined as understanding. So when the Course in Miracles says, see the light, it means understand. And all deep understanding emerges from that foundational realization of who we are. Because when I deeply understand who I am, then and only then do I understand who you are. And when I deeply understand who I am, then and only then do I understand my relationship to the universe and the earth on which we stand. When we are not aware of who we really are, we are fractured in our self-perception. And when I'm confused about who I am, I'm going to be confused about who you are. When I'm confused about who I really am, then I'm going to be confused about my relationship to the universe. I'm going to be confused about my relationship to the earth on which we stand. So enlightenment, from A Course in Miracles perspective, is a shift in self-identification. It's a shift in self-perception from body identification to spirit identification. Because the Christ is not a body. The Christ in you, the reality of who you are, is not physical but spiritual. So the message of enlightenment and the message of Christmas is that who we really are is not that which is of this world, but rather that which is of the Spirit. It is the truth in our hearts. The celebration of Christmas is the celebration of self-actualization, because it is the celebration of our giving birth to that which we truly are within a world that says that we aren't. Mary symbolizes the feminine within all of us. Mary symbolizes the heart within all of us. Mary represents the receptive within all of us. Mary in the Bible was awakened from her slumber and told to go onto the roof. Awakened from our slumber. All of us have been awakened from our slumber, or we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be coming to lectures like this. You wouldn't be seeking spiritual knowledge, spiritual wisdom, in whatever way that you look for it, had you not in some way been aroused from your slumber. Told to go up onto the roof where the angels would speak to her. Going up onto the roof, of course, means going onto the higher mind. And she was told that something extraordinary was going to happen. That is where it all begins. You know, the world does not tell you that you are extraordinary. The world does not tell you that God has chosen you. But that is the truth of your being. The truth of your being is that you are what A Course in Miracles calls the Christ. And the whole idea of the Christ being born onto the earth means that the Spirit impregnates matter. Now, many times people have a problem with God being called He, but the interesting thing about that language and that particular gender identification is that within a spiritual context, to the extent to which God is He, the human heart is she. Just as in the Eastern religions, the yin force is the earth force, is the feminine, and the sky force is the spirit force, is the yang. The yang impregnates, the heart is impregnated. We conceive a divine child. So the heart opens to receive a power that is not of this world. And out of that comes forth a being which is fathered by God and mothered by our humanity. And that is the purpose of our lives. The purpose of our lives is to give birth on this planet to the truth of who we are. And when the Christ child in the Bible was born, the three kings bowed before that child as a symbol of the fact that when you are standing in the truth of who you are, the powers of the world bow to you. When you are standing within a persona, which is the self with a little s that your ego made, the ego being, in Course terms, the way that ancient Greeks used it, the very idea of a small separated self. It is a false belief about who we are. The world tells you you are your body, and you were born onto this earth, and you will die, and there was nothing beforehand, and there's nothing after, and that's who you are, and all of the circumstances of your mortal experience are the truth. So your successes define you, your failures define you, other people's experiences define you, other people's opinion of you define you, your circumstances define you, whether you're in today or out today define you. That's what the ego says that you are. And all of that identification we carry like a burden, because it is a burden, and it is untrue. And yet the thinking of the world is dominated by a perception based on the evidence of the physical senses. And the physical senses says that you are a separate being, a being separate from all the rest. Then we are delusional. We are delusional because we are basing our perception of ourselves and all reality on what the physical eyes see and what all the physical senses perceive. It's like in the Greek tragedy of Oedipus. When Oedipus killed his father, slept with his mother, and when he realized what had happened, he went blind. So Oedipus, that represents that which has happened to all of us. Killed the father. In other words, destroyed our connection to that which is the truth of who we are. Slept with the mother, meaning we're having unnatural relationships with the things of the earth. We're a little too close to the things of the earth. We're not supposed to be sleeping with the mother. It's an unnatural relationship that we have with the mortal forces. Too tight, too close, too over-identified with the mortal forces, too little identified with the spirit forces, and this has made us spiritually blind. Christmas, we celebrate the fact that in any given moment, we conceive the truth of who we are. But it takes discipline because we have all been taught by the thinking of the world from the time that we were so small, it was pre-verbal, that you are this, but you are not the entirety. When the truth of the matter is, this is simply a suit of clothes. The Course in Miracles tells us that your physical body is just a suit of clothes. That your physical life did not begin with your physical birth. Your physical birth was a continuation of your physical life, and your physical death will be a continuation of your physical death. Now, as we enter into the holiday season, the ego, the false belief about who we are, which is not only a false belief about who we are, but which is vigilant. All energy continues in the direction it's been moving. That's what inertia means. The tendency of the object to move in whatever direction it's been moving until there's an introduction of a counterforce. The mind is always moving. There's no such thing as a neutral thought. So either thought is in the service of the truth, is in the service of the love that is who we actually are, or it is inverted and it is used for the purpose of separating us from that love. One of the ways that the ego uses the holiday season is to make it so much about the material plane. So much about where we're going to be, who we're going to be with, whether we're going to travel, we're going to go with your parents, no, we're going to go with my parent, we're going to be at my sister's. I can't stand my sister. Do we really have to do this again? Do I have to buy presents? I don't know. I should buy that present for her, but the truth of the matter is I want that. I don't want to give that to her. And anyway, why should I have to spend all this money? I don't even like these people. All of those things, right? So that's exactly what the ego would do with this season to rob you of its mystical meaning. So tonight is a very good night to make a decision which universe you want to inhabit this year. And that's the decision that we make every moment, either consciously or unconsciously, but it's very important to make it during the holidays because if you allow yourself to be drawn into the delusional ego world, you will miss the power of Christmas. And Christmas is powerful. It is not just an external reality. External realities are just the tip of the iceberg. It's the internal reality that you want to experience in order that Christmas might feed you, in order that Christmas might nourish you, because the highest nourishment is the realization of who we are. When we realize who we are, then we realize what we're here to do. When we realize who we are, we realize what we're here to do. And when we realize what we are here to do, we are automatically given the power by which to do it. So when the Christ child is born and the three kings bow before the Christ child, as I was saying, the point there is for you to remember that when you are in this innocent, newly born self, and the Christ is born anew in any given moment. That's the whole point of the holy instant, is that the Christ is born anew in any given moment because it doesn't even remember what happened in the time before this moment because it wasn't real anyway. The Course in Miracles calls forgiveness selective remembering. Now, the reason the powers of the world, represented and symbolized by the three kings, bow before this is because when you are in the state of total love, because God is love, the Course in Miracles says you are an idea in the mind of God. You are an idea in the mind of God. So when you remember who you are, you remember you are love, you remember you are connected eternally to the Father. There is no separation, the Course in Miracles says, between God and his, in this world, seemingly separated sons. But we have forgotten who we are, and having forgotten who we are, once again killed the Father. We are blind to our inheritance. Because when you remember, the Course says, who you are, you remember who your Father is, you remember that your Father has infinite wealth, infinite power. And you, as the beloved son of this infinitely powerful Father, have this as your inheritance. Your inheritance, however, is only given you when you remember who you are. Because if you don't remember that you have this divine inheritance, then you don't claim it. But you can only claim your inheritance of divine authority when you are in the space of who you are, which is another way of saying, as the Course says, that miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The Course in Miracles says, you are heir to the laws that rule within the world that you identify with. The world we identify with as mortal beings is ruled by principles of time and space and the laws of time and space, laws of scarcity, laws of limitation. And when this is what I think I am, then I experience myself as at the effect of that. When, however, we are in a space of love, and it's work. It's saying, where am I being judgmental? Where am I being controlling? Where am I playing victim? Where am I being negative? Where am I blaming? Where am I not taking responsibility? It's the work that we all know. Where am I staying stuck in the past? Where am I making it the future? Where am I not opening my heart? Where am I not being generous? The result is a mystery, but the work is not really mysterious. It's, as he says in the Course in Miracles, my way is not difficult, it's different. It's not that these principles are difficult. What's difficult is getting over our resistance to practicing them. What's difficult is getting over our resistance to applying them. When we do, however, once again, miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. So once again, miracles are everyone's right. Miracles are your natural inheritance as a child of God. But purification is necessary first, meaning when you are thinking any loveless thought, you are denying your inheritance. A miracle means the shift in thinking from fear to love, which is a natural corrective. The Course in Miracles says miracles occur naturally. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. When I'm in a space of pure love and you're a space of pure love, our relationship works. Nobody doubts that. The issue is what happens when one or both of us allow ourselves to be blinded by judgment. Because one of us gets kicked off our realization of who we are, and therefore what we present to the world instead of our love is our anger, our judgment, our negativity, our controllingness, which then, more often than not, tempts the other person, unless they're to evolve to be pulled into that. The other person then gets reactive and gets pulled into their craziness. And then that's called chaos. That's called relationships that don't work. And that is called a world that is devoid of reverence and devoid of devotion. And as I said before, all energy moves in one direction or the other. And that's extremely important. There's no such thing as a neutral thought, the Course in Miracles says. All thought creates form on some level. So if we are not waking up in the morning and saying, the purpose of my life here is that I love, in order that I might be part of a universe that not only knows how to order itself, but knows how to correct itself when it is out of order. If I am not doing that, then the energy that I could have used for that purpose will be used to manifest more chaos in my life. It's insanity. And so the Course in Miracles says, it is not up to you. No, the quote I want to use here is, you are completely free to misuse your mind. To misuse your mind means to use it for non-loving thought. But what you cannot do is diminish its power. So what we're seeing played out in the world is the same thing that we see played out in our own individual lives, a reflection of what we have done with our minds. And when you, in your life, recognize that everything that's happening to you is a reflection of your own consciousness, then you do what in spiritual and psychotherapeutic and recovery circles and health and wellness circles is called the work. You do the work. Has somebody done the work? That means, have you looked at your own character defects? Have you cleaned up your own side of the street? Have you atoned for your mistakes? Have you asked for forgiveness where you need to? Have you made amends? At a certain point, we kind of know what that work is. Enough of us have read, there are enough books about it these days. There are enough religious and spiritual traditions. It's a mainstream impulse that is now available to anyone who is interested. What we have to do to unravel a thought system that can be so cruel and that can lead to such chaos. And this thought system of ego, the Course in Miracles says, is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. My favorite Christmas carol is O Holy Night. And the lyrics are so profound. It says, long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. Now, sin in Course in Miracles means mistakes. The mistake is that you deviated from love and thought fear instead. And that, long lay the world in sin and error pining, it causes suffering, it causes pain, it causes our lives to not work. People don't want to work with you, people don't want to love you, people don't want to be with you. Your world doesn't unfold according to natural harmony. Why? Because your own thinking is blocking the miracle that would have otherwise occurred. The miracle is your natural inheritance. Because when you, just as I said before, that when you identify with this world, you are at the effect of the laws of this world. When you identify with the world beyond this, which is the world of spirit, you are in the quantum field where you are automatically lifted above the laws of time and space. I love the line in the Course where he says, I assure you, time and space are under my control. In other words, when we are not strategizing, but simply dwelling within the quantum field of love, within that quantum field of love, there is no limit to possibility. There is no scarcity. When you move from body identification to spirit identification, you move from a world of limits to the world of the limitless. You move from the world where there are only some things that can happen to a world in which anything can happen. As it says in A Course in Miracles, the very beginning of the book, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. Now, I love the way the line is, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Because as long as I identify only with my mortal self, there's a limit to how worthy I can feel, because we've all made mistakes. So if you're judging yourself and you're judging other people according to how well you did, nobody's ever going to measure up as perfect, because on the mortal plane, who of us is perfect? We're here to learn these lessons, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. But the spirit, the Course in Miracles says, created by God, then like all things created by God, according to the Course, is unalterable, unchangeable, and indestructible. So what does that mean? That means that, okay, the truth of who I am, who we all are, is the Christ. Sometimes I act like it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes you're this loving self, sometimes you're triggered. Sometimes something happened and it knocked you out of your memory of how perfect you are. It knocked you out of your memory of how perfect other people are. It's pretty easy to do it when everybody's acting the way you want them to. It's pretty easy to do it when everybody's saying exactly what you want them to say. But that's not what life is. People are brought together, the Course in Miracles says, for maximal soul growth opportunity. There's not all that much soul growth if all I ever encounter are people who tell me what I want to hear. Soul growth is when we are led, the Course says, assigned lessons, which have to do with an opportunity to challenge what your mortal mind says, to challenge what your physical senses perceive, and to know what your heart says it's true. Now, in that moment when, because you're triggered, you don't express the true you, the Christ you, the total unconditional love you, where does the Christ within you go? It's still in there. It's like the file that you just didn't choose to bring down. It's an undeletable file in the computer of your consciousness, but you are always free what file you're going to bring down. And we do make that choice every single day. So in every given moment, we are either opening to a miracle or deflecting a miracle. Every single moment, you are either opening to a miracle or deflecting the miracle. We deflect the miracle in moments like this. Protection, defense, attack, defense. That's what the ego mind is, attack, defense. Now, the image of giving birth to the Christ. Once again, this is the feminine. The idea of opening up to God, conceiving. The consciousness is the womb, just like in a woman's womb on the physical realm, and she's pregnant with the baby who is then born into the world. The spiritual parallel is that consciousness is the womb. It is the feminine in all of us, impregnated by God, and you can feel it. You know, it's sometimes like when you do body work and somebody literally, you can practice these energies. You can feel it when you're tough in your heart. And you practice opening up. There are physical practices that we use. That's what meditation is. That's what prayer is. You soften in your heart. You conceive something. And then that which comes forth from you is different than what would have come forth from you had you not meditated, had you not prayed, had you not done that work. And Christmas is so powerful because you've got billions of people who are considering the possibility of infinite possibility. Now, we all know organized religion. We all have our thoughts about it. A Course in Miracles is not only not an organized religion, it's not a religion. There's no dogma here. There's no doctrine here. It's simply a presentation of these universal spiritual themes that are at the heart of all the great religious and spiritual teachings. Now, we are living at a time on the earth where the ego mind prevails in ways that do more than damage to your life or damage to your life or damage to your life. We're living at a time where the ego mind prevails collectively in a way that is literally perilous to the possibility of life on earth. There's never been a time in history where our getting it wrong could, if we're not careful, produce catastrophe on a global scale that could actually cause a human-made extinction. There have been extinctions before. There have been periods of extinctions, species extinction. But no species before has caused its own extinction. Yet Homo sapiens, if not careful, will do that. In terms of the environmental crisis, in terms of the reckless and irresponsible ways that we deal with nuclear energy, if there is a grand extinction of Homo sapiens as a species, it will not be because of some outer force. It will be because we caused it. Now, collectively, it's no different than individually. When life's not working, when we're going through a crisis, from a spiritual perspective, we're taught to recognize that the answer is not going to come because you're going to tweak things on the outside over there. You're going to tweak things on the outside over there. You're going to try to minimize the damage that has been brought forth by your craziness over here. You're going to try to minimize the damage brought forth by your craziness over there. At a certain point, that's not enough. It won't work. At a certain point, you have to recognize your craziness. That's why Gandhi said, the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. And that's why the birth of the Christ is so significant. It means the birth into the world of a sane humanity. Because the ego mind is insane. The ego mind, just as the spirit mind, the Christ, the Shekinah, the Buddha mind, whatever you want to call it, is in service to love, the ego mind is in service to lovelessness. It is insane to treat your earth which is your only home you have here, to treat it without reverence, to treat it without devotion. It's insane. It's insane that we keep piling up nuclear weapons when, although we have thousands of them, 10 of those go off, it's over for life as we know it. And yet we are so swimming in the oceanic field of this insanity that for a collective, much like for an individual, it takes a bottoming out a realization that, as they say in recovery, this whole thing is unmanageable. And that is what is happening now. What happens in an individual life is you go through a moment of crisis, a situation of crisis, and if you are on any path of enlightenment, you're not guided to think, oh, it's all other people's fault. Yeah, it's all other people's fault. And it's all they won't let you, and they did you wrong, and all of that. If you're on a path of enlightenment, you are taught first to look at yourself and to know the extent to which whatever has happened, even if it has not been initiated by you, you on some level conspired to make it as damaging as it was, because in the presence of the true you, you are lifted above all those forces which would keep you down. The entire human race is there now. The entire human race is facing, if we are not careful, we could experience mass extinction. You know, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, the health and wellness spiritual community is sophisticated about drugs and alcohol, because so many people have had that experience or had the experience of someone they love. We've all known people or know of people who have died of drug overdoses, died of alcoholism, enough that we're all pretty clear in our understanding physical life, the survival of the physical body, is not guaranteed. It's time for us to get out of our denial. It's time for us to get out of our magical thinking, because the survival of our democracy is not guaranteed either. The survival of the human race is not guaranteed. Just like it's not, you can treat your body a certain kind of way. There's no guarantee your body's going to survive. You treat your planet a certain kind of way, collectively. You treat your entire human race a certain way, collectively, and survival is not guaranteed either. But we can transform. And when we do transform, we recognize that the change that has got to happen is inside us. I was reading a wonderful essay by a rabbi named Anna Levy-Lyons, and she talked about the evolution from Homo sapiens to Homo amandi. Homo sapiens is a thinking species, but it is not a thinking that is necessarily aligned with the heart. Homo sapiens thinks, but in its thinking, it has not been unwilling to create societies based on hierarchy and based on gender and based on race and based on domination. Homo sapiens can either continue with that trajectory, in which case destruction, mass destruction, is a possibility. Or we can transform into what she calls Homo amandi, and that is the species that loves. And what's so fascinating about the planet on which we live right now is that there are so many people, whether they conceptualize it that way or not, are already doing that. Not only doing that in terms of our spiritual lives, our psychotherapeutic orientation, but also in terms of projects, both in this country and around the world, people who are building just societies and sustainable projects, showing how we could do agriculture, how we could take care of the environment, how we could do business, how we could do immigration, how we could take care of those who are poor, how we could take care of those who are oppressed, how we could manage a society and create societies that are based on justice and in balance with the earth on which we live. The issue is that the clock is ticking. The issue is that right now, the main powers of the world are still in the hands of those who have what is ultimately a regressive consciousness, a consciousness which is based on the thinking that got us here. But when you look at where we are with an honest observation and a sophisticated consciousness, then clearly where we are is not okay. And therefore, the thinking that got us to where we are should not be the thinking that guides us going forward. And this is exactly what Einstein meant when he said the thinking of the world, the problems of the world will not be solved by the level of thinking that we were at when we created them. All that religion is a reminder of how to think. That's why in Latin, the word religio means bind back, take you back to the thinking which is natural to who you are. Because the birth of the Christ, he comes for one reason: to love one another. To love, he taught us to love one another. Now, let's talk about why the message, the Christ, to love one another, is the salvation of the world. The only thing to be saved from is our insanity. There's nothing to be saved from out there. Everything we want to be saved from out there is a product of what's in here. So salvation is the process of being saved, lifted from the thinking which ultimately kills us if we allow it to. So the Savior, and I love how the Course says there would be no Savior if there were no need for one. Now, the Course in Miracles is not about an exclusive Jesus. The Course in Miracles does say that Jesus completely actualized the consciousness of the Christ while he was on the earth. But it does not tell us that he is the only one who has done that. And the Course in Miracles says that that door, no one name could contain that entire energy. So in the Course in Miracles, a line like "there is only one begotten Son." So one traditional Christian interpretation of "there is only one begotten Son" is Jesus was it and he's the only begotten Son. The Course in Miracles, the metaphysical interpretation of the line "there's only one begotten Son" is there's only one of us here. So if you look at us through the body's eyes, there are billions of us on this planet. But through the eye of the spirit, we see beyond what the physical senses perceive to that quantum realm where there's only one of us. There really is no place where you stop and I start. The reason it is salvation to know that there is no coming unto the Father but through me, even though this has been taken to mean by the ego mind, but through Jesus as an entity. From a metaphysical perspective, no coming to the Father but through me means unconditional love. Through unconditional love, because in unconditional love, I recognize that I am you and you are me. That is the only salvation of the world. The salvation of the world in the 21st century is the realization what we do to somebody else, we are doing to ourselves. Because you are me. And the Course in Miracles says that time and space are learning. They are simply items that are used as teaching devices, learning devices, the Course in Miracles says. So if I do something to you, actually it comes back to me right away, but I experience it as time. Either it will come through you or someone else. So the salvation of the world is the birth of Christ within us by whatever words you use. The Course in Miracles does use the traditional Christian language, but in decidedly non-traditional ways, because it is not a religion. There's no dogma, there's no doctrine. The tone of the Course is just thought you might like to know. All the religious holidays of all the great religions take us, should we choose, into that deeper realization. The Course in Miracles says Jesus is someone who lived on this earth, but thought only the thoughts of heaven. So what does that mean? The Course says heaven is neither a condition nor a place. It is a realization of our oneness. He lived on the earth, fully embodied, but his mind had been healed of all the delusions of the ego mind. That's why he says in the Course in Miracles, I don't have anything you don't have. The difference between us is I don't have anything else. I'm in a state which is still potential within you. You have the perfect Christ mind. I have the perfect Christ mind. What we have that Jesus doesn't have any longer is excuses why we don't think it's appropriate to use that mind in this moment. Right? Like, oh, this is not about forgiveness, trust me. Right? No, that's not what this is about. Whereas he and any enlightened master never goes to that place. Their mind has been completely healed. He says in the Course in Miracles, I'm not an ego-oriented teacher, he says. I look forward to the day when you're up here with me, in terms of my consciousness. But the fact that we're not, the Course in Miracles says he has been authorized. He has been authorized by God to help us, should we request it. And it is not forced upon us, because love does not force. But he has become one, the Course says, with the Holy Spirit, one with the atonement, which is the process of the correction of our thinking. So if we're upset, we're crazy, we're nuts, we don't know, like, I'm all crazy, I'm all neurotic, help me, God help me. The Course in Miracles says, your good intentions are not enough, but your willingness is everything. To say, I am willing to see this differently. And today, that's not just for us. That's not just a gift for us at Christmas to realize completely transforms our own lives. To say my life will be different next year to the extent to which I open my heart. My life will be different next year to the extent to which I wake up every morning and I remember who I am is love, and my only purpose here is to love. And I say to God, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say to whom? And whether it's through the Course in Miracles or any other practice, we work to align our thinking. That's why the word discipline and disciple come from the same place. Just like in yoga, you learn the posture, you learn the correct position. Blessing rather than blaming is the correct position. Focusing on what's happening now rather than what happened in the past is the correct position. Focusing on the present rather than the future is the correct position. Saying only what I am not giving can be lacking in any situation, rather than looking for what other people are going to give to you, realizing that what you give is what's going to determine what happens here, is the correct position. And just as with the physical body in yoga, once you develop the musculature through practice of these correct positions, you become strong. Your spiritual muscles, your attitudinal muscles become strong, and then you can relax within that. And today, that transformation of consciousness is needed not only by individuals, we need to go there as a human race. And that's where the human race stands. The good news is how many people in their own way do see this. The problem, as is always the problem in history, is that the main powers of the world, whether it's technological, political, financial, are still in the grip of the regressive consciousness. But remember, when you stand forth as the innocent, as the Christ in any given moment, innocent because you're in a place where there is no guilt. Your guilt in the moments when you got it wrong, that didn't obliterate the truth of who you are. And as we atone and make amends, we go back to the innocence. And that is the grace and the mercy we want to show to others. When you were in that place, you were lifted above. You were lifted above the laws of time and space, and the kings of the world will bow to you. And then everything, all of the consequences of our wrong decisions, the Course in Miracles says, will be undone. Now, it's hard to even imagine that for the whole world, that somehow the consequences of our wrong decision are going to be done and the oceans are going to be clean. The consequences of our wrong decision are going to be undone and the air is going to be clean. The consequences of our wrong decision are going to be undone and the earth will be replenished. The consequences of our wrong decision will be undone and there will be no nuclear bombs and there will be no war and there will be no poverty and there will be no needless suffering. It's almost difficult for us to even conceive of it. But that possibility exists whether we currently think we can conceive of it or not. It's difficult to conceive the size of the sun, thousands of times larger than the earth. And that's just a tiny thing compared to the size of the universe. And the universe, it's difficult to conceive. That doesn't mean it's not there. But to be open to the possibility of infinite possibility, to be open to the possibility that God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. But we can't just say, oh, God will handle it, God will save us, because God cannot do God cannot do for us what God cannot do through us. The Course in Miracles says, I need your hands and I need your feet. It is when we say, we know that God can work any miracle, but the miracle is a shift in our own thinking. And the Course in Miracles says, God has a plan, not only a plan for the healing of the world, but that God has an answer to every problem the moment the problem appears. So the salvation of the world is the realization of the Christ, because the salvation of the world is the realization of who we really are and the realization that we are all one. Without that consciousness of love and without that consciousness that we are all one, what we do to others we're doing to ourselves, there is no reason to expect that the next 50 or 100 years on this planet are not going to continue to be ones through which humanity reaps what we have sown. Whether you use this language or any other language, all the great religions say the same thing. Whether it's the story of Judaism or the story of Christianity, the story of Islam, the story of Hinduism, the story of Buddhism, whether you're getting it from the Course in Miracles, whether you're getting it from psychotherapy, whether you're getting it from a spiritual or religious or secular place, doesn't matter. The language is not what matters. What matters is the realization. But because the Course in Miracles is written in that language, and because it's almost Christmas, we take this opportunity to think on these things. The human race will not make it if we are shallow thinkers. These are not shallow times, and shallow, superficial thinking will not do. We must become deep thinkers, and the deepest thinking is a thinking which reconnects us to the heart. And that's the power of any religious holiday, any religious ceremony or ritual, where we drop down into a place where we're not just smart, we're wise. With all the laws that exist on this planet, and look at the state of the world. Obviously, something more is called for. So every time there's a great holiday like this, where billions of people are joined in considering the possibility that there might be another way, that, the Course in Miracles says, is when salvation begins, when we consider the possibility there might be another way. Consider that for yourself this year, and consider it for the world. Consider the possibility there might be another way. And then the very thing that the ego says is so awful is when it all starts and begins. You fall to your knees. You realize, I can't do it by myself. My way isn't working. Our way isn't working. And we think that's going to be such a horrible realization, and then it turns out to be such a relief, because that's not when the world is over. That's when God looks at you and he says, can we start now? I was waiting for you to be this humble. I was waiting for you to be in a place where you're over the delusion that you can fix this. And when humanity realizes that, and we are experiencing a collective bottoming out, but from that descent we can now rise. So let's, in our own hearts, give birth to Christ. Lesson 303 in the Course in Miracles says, the Holy Christ is born in me today. Watch with me, angels. Watch with me today. And the Course in Miracles defines angels as the thoughts of God. Watch with me, angels. Watch with me today. Let all God's holy thoughts surround me, and be still with me while heaven's Son is born. Heaven is not a condition or a place. It is an awareness of our oneness. When heaven's Son is born, that means we become that species. We become those people who realize that we are all one. Let earthly sounds be quiet, and the sights to which I am accustomed disappear. Let Christ be welcomed where he is at home, and let him hear the sounds he understands, and see but sights that show his Father's love. Let him no longer be a stranger here, for he is born again in me today. Your Son is welcome, Father. He has come to save me from the evil self I made. That is so profound, that we are saved from this notion of ourselves as not good enough and not good, and guilt and self-blame. You know, everybody talks these days about love yourself, love yourself, love yourself. Well, based on what? Because if I'm only supposed to love myself and I only think of myself as the mistakes I've made, it's very difficult to do. But when you accept yourself as who you are, as God created you, then you are saved from thinking that your guilty self is the truth. You know, you've made some mistakes, so is everybody else. That's not the truth of who we are. He is but what I really am in truth. He is the self that you have given me. He is the Son you love above all things. He is myself as you created me. It is not Christ that can be crucified. Safe in your arms, let me receive your Son. When the Course in Miracles says the Christ in you cannot be crucified, that's why there's nothing to be reactive about. There's nothing to be defensive about. Because no matter what people say about us or do to us, the truth of who we are is unassailable. These truths are so big. And when it comes to Jesus and when it comes to Christ, no religion has a monopoly on these principles. They're too huge. It's like nobody has a monopoly on outer space. The concept of the Christ. And I think, I as a Jew, when I first started reading the Course in Miracles, I found it was so interesting for me because I knew so many people brought up Christian who have so much to get over about those words. We weren't taught anything about them one way or the other. My mother just said, "We don't read that one, honey." So for me, it was new. It wasn't laden for me. So, I always say there's something in this book to offend just about anybody. And I know that whether you are coming at this from a place where this wasn't verbiage that you were brought up with, or even more, if you were brought up from in a tradition with this verbiage, sometimes that can be even stranger to realize that these are principles and that they have nothing to do with the words. There's a part in this course where it says, forget your ideas of good and bad, forget your ideas of right and wrong, forget this course, and come with empty hands unto your God. And the Course in Miracles says we can't come to God without coming to each other. So there is no realization of the truth and the power and the glory and the joy of Christmas without being willing to forgive everybody. Forgiveness simply means knowing that all the guilt, all the mistakes, all the craziness, and I think we particularly need this right now. We need such a big generalized amnesty, emotional amnesty. Okay, somebody didn't say the right thing. Okay, somebody didn't do the right thing. Okay, somebody doesn't think the way you want them to think. We are so burdened by our judgments these days. Christmas is a time when we are reminded to let all that go, to open our hearts, to just seek to not only experience the newborn in ourselves, but the newborn in everyone else. And if we do that, and when we do that, and as we do that, we will see a star in the sky, and we will see light in the darkness, and there will be a miracle on this earth, and all of us will think to ourselves, I wonder if that had anything to do with those prayers we said. And we'll know in our hearts that it did. Let's pray. As we close our outer eye, we open to the light which is within. And as we do this, we see a great and golden light within our minds. And we know that something profound and beautiful and unlimited is being born in us. And in this season, we are pregnant with this possibility, holding within the womb of our consciousness the divine idea that we are more than we think we are. That we are not mere bodies, we are spirits. We are not our guilt, we are our innocence. That we live in not the past or the future, but in this moment now. We are not limited, but unlimited. We are not weak, but we are strong. We are not beings full of tarnish and sin, but rather beings who have made mistakes. And as we atone and make amends, all consequences of our wrong decisions are nullified and made void. There is a place in me and a place in you where we are not just filled with mental images that are the same, but going even deeper, there is a place in you and a place in me where we are more than the same. We are one. And in this moment, we release in our bodies and in our minds all walls that divide us from anyone or anything. We see no need to hold anyone outside the circle of our love. In this moment, we remember who we are, the children of a divine parent, with a mission here to give love and to receive love. We breathe in this realization. We are divine beings. We are love itself. And we are on this earth to extend that love and to receive that love. And as we do, we are lifted and shall be lifted higher and higher. No longer at the effect of the limits of this world, but taking our part in a great awakening, which is the salvation of this world. There is a name for that oneness, that place where we are one, that divine self that we share. One name is Jesus. And as we think his name, we are automatically reminded of who we are. Tonight, should we request it? Should we accept it? Should we be willing to give birth to it? That divine idea is born in us into the world. As we think his name, we shall be automatically reminded of the truth of who we are and the truth of others. We will be reminded of our mission here and given the power by which to accomplish it. For such is the power and the glory and the grace of God. Whatever images are alive within your consciousness, allow them to live there. For God's angels shall whisper in your ear all you need to know. You shall be lifted high. You shall not be left to wallow in your weariness and struggle. You shall be released from the chains that bind you, as God is given birth through you. And so it is. Together, we all say,